The holographic display in the heart of the UNS Indomitus's Combat Information Center projected the words with a cold, sterile light that seemed to absorb the room's warmth. The title was stark: Vorlag Hegemony, Threat Assessment and Parity Analysis. And beneath it, the single, terrifying line of commentary added by the ship's own intelligence division, a line that had become a grim mantra for the bridge crew over the past week. They thought our weapons were weak until they heard the screams. Sub-Commander Anya Sharma rubbed at her temples, a futile attempt to ward off the migraine that had been building for 72 hours straight. The recycled air of the warship tasted of ozone and anxiety. For 23 days, the Indomitus had been a phantom, coasting on minimal emissions as it shadowed the Vorlag fleet, cutting its way through the Orion Spur. The data they had gathered was as unambiguous as it was horrifying. The Vorlag were a civilization perfected to the point of arrogance. Beings of a complex silicon-based biology, they resembled animate obsidian statues, their forms shifting with a fluid grace that defied their crystalline nature. Their ships were not so much built as grown, immense cathedral-like vessels of the same shimmering black material, which didn't sail the void but commanded it, bending space-time with an ease that made humanity's jump drives look like primitive, violent explosions. Their disdain for humanity, meticulously decoded from their high-bandwidth internal communications, was absolute. New designation for Homo sapiens just dropped, Commodore, announced Tech Officer Ben Carter from a sensor station. His voice, usually a welcome source of dry humor, was strained. They're calling us the ephemera. Apparently, our tragically short carbon-based lifespans are a subject of philosophical pity for them. Their latest missive to the Hegemony Corps describes our projectile weapons as an exercise in charming Newtonian simplicity. Our fusion-tipped torpedoes, chaotic thermal expressions lacking in all elegance. The entirety of the Terran Alliance fleet, sir, is officially logged in their records as, and I'm quoting the translation here, the spasmodic death throes of a fleeting, disorganized biology. Commodore Elias Thorne stood before the main view screen, his back to the crew. He was a tall man with a stillness about him that seemed to bend the nervous energy of the room around him. His face, when he turned, was a landscape of quiet authority, etched with the memory of 100 conflicts on a dozen forgotten worlds. He wasn't angry. He looked weary, like a man forced to contemplate an ugly but necessary truth. "They aren't wrong, Ben. Not from their perspective," Thorne said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carried easily through the tense silence. "They perceive reality through the lens of quantum mechanics and energy states. They see our ships and they measure the joules. A solid object propelled by chemical or magnetic force is, to a species that can manipulate the gravitational constant, a fundamentally archaic concept." Anya pushed herself away from her console, her frustration boiling over. "Commodore, with all respect, one of our archaic spinal-mounted mass drivers can accelerate a 10-ton ferric slug to 0.7 light speed. The resulting impact is anything but archaic." "To them it is," Thorne countered, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his command staff before settling on Anya. His expression softened for a fraction of a second, the look of a mentor burdened by the knowledge of what he would have to ask of his protege. "Their shields are not barriers in the way we understand them. They are localized reality warping fields. They don't block energy, they rewrite the equation. A physical projectile, no matter its velocity, is simply a variable they can delete from existence. They have analyzed us, Anya, and they have found us wanting. That is why they move with such impunity, and that is why they are on a direct course for Terra Nova." The name fell like a stone into the quiet pool of the CIC. Terra Nova, a world of 20 million souls, the jewel in the crown of humanity's colonial expansion, famed for its breathtaking bioengineered landscapes and its vibrant artistic communities. Its planetary defenses were designed to repel pirates and opportunistic raiders, not a fleet from a Tier 1 civilization. The Indomitus was the only capital ship in the sector, a lone sentinel standing before an avalanche. "So, just to be clear," Ben Carter muttered, swiveling in his chair, "we're outgunned, outclassed, and our very existence is considered a quaint cosmic joke by a fleet of sentient crystals who are about to commit planetary-scale murder. Fantastic." Anyone got any synth coffee? My hands are starting to shake. A ghost of a smile touched Thorne's lips, though it never reached his eyes. They have made one critical error in their calculations, Mr. Carter. One fatal oversight, born from their flawless logic. He looked directly at Anya, and the weight of his stare was a physical thing. They have analyzed our technology, but they have failed to analyze our nature. Anya's heart began to beat a heavy, deliberate rhythm against her ribs. She knew what he meant. Her station, located in a shielded, isolated compartment 2 decks below, was known formally as the psionic resonance chamber. It contained no weapons, no targeting systems. It was a sterile white room dominated by a single high-backed neurointegration chair, surrounded by a web of humming, silver machinery. Its official designation was Project Aethelred. The crew, in hushed whispers, called it the Cacophony. It was humanity's most secret, most terrible weapon. A weapon born not from physics but from history, not from engineering but from pain. They believe our chaotic biology, our volatile emotions, are our greatest weakness, Thorne continued, his voice dropping, compelling them all to lean in. They see our capacity for grief, for rage, for terror as a fundamental flaw in our design, a fatal impurity in an otherwise functional organism. He paused, letting the silence hang. They are about to learn that our greatest flaw is the most powerful weapon in this quadrant of the galaxy. Later, in the Spartan confines of her personal quarters, Anya Sharma began the ritual. The final preparation was not technical, it was mental. She sat in the center of the small room, legs crossed, eyes closed, her breathing slow and even. The Aethelred archive was not a machine one simply operated. It was an abyss one had to peer into, and to do so without being consumed required a will of iron and a mind like a fortress. Her mother, Dr. Lena Sharma, had been the architect of the project, a brilliant, troubled woman who pioneered the field of psychochronology. She had theorized that a species' collective history of emotional experience, its qualia, could be digitized and weaponized, not as a beam of energy, but as a broadcast of pure, undiluted feeling, a weapon of forced empathy. Empathy is a bludgeon in a universe that only understands force. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, a quote from her journals. To a being of pure, cold logic, a sudden, overwhelming torrent of irrational emotion would not be a persuasive argument. It would be a catastrophic system failure. Lena Sharma had died proving her theories. The initial, small-scale tests of the archive had left her psychically shattered. Anya, who had inherited her mother's unique psionic sensitivity, was the only candidate who had ever successfully interfaced with the machine and retained her sanity. She was the project's sole success, and its only operator. She pushed the memories away, focusing on the mental exercises. She built walls in her mind, bastions of calm and discipline. She pictured her own consciousness as a single, steady flame in the center of a vast, dark chamber. The archive would be the storm that would rage outside that chamber. Her job was to be the conduit, to open the floodgates and direct the hurricane, but never to let it extinguish her own light. A chime sounded. Commodore Thorne's face appeared on her wall-mounted comm unit. He looked older than he had on the bridge. "How are you, Anya?" he asked, foregoing rank. "Baseline is stable, Commodore. I'm ready." "I've been reading your mother's final report again," he said, his voice heavy. "The one she wrote after the Ganymede test. She called the archive a crime against sanity. She recommended it be dismantled. She also wrote that in the face of annihilation, any crime is preferable to extinction," Anya countered softly. "She knew what this was for, a weapon of last resort. It seems we've arrived there." Thorne ran a hand over his face. "The simulations are one thing. The psych reports, you were experiencing emotional echoes for weeks. This is a full-scale fleet. The feedback will be immense." "I can handle the feedback," she said, her voice more confident than she felt. The echoes from the last simulation had been terrifying, waking nightmares of falling phantom pains from injuries she'd never sustained, moments of profound, inexplicable grief for people who had never existed. "That is an order, Sub-Commander," he said, his voice hardening back into the command tone she knew so well. It was his own shield. The moment you feel the integrity of your consciousness begin to slip, you disengage. The Indomitus can take a few scratches. I will not lose my best officer to the ghosts in our own machine. Understood, sir, she replied, the connection closing. She was left in the silence of her room, the ghosts already stirring at the edges of her mind. She wasn't just his best officer, she was the daughter of his oldest friend. They both knew this was more than professional. She stood up and walked towards the door, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. It was time to go and sing the song of human sorrow. The Vorlog hegemony fleet translated from the unreal space of FTL into the Terra Nova system with a silent, breathtaking arrogance. 5 colossal dreadnoughts, their black crystalline hulls seeming to devour the light of the nearby star, positioned themselves in a high, menacing orbit. A swarm of smaller, dagger-like cruisers fanned out to form an impenetrable cordon. They paid no more attention to the lone human warship than a mountain would to a fly buzzing at its base. On the bridge of the Indomitus, alarms shrieked their electronic terror. Commodore! No hails, no warnings. They are charging primary weapons, targeting the orbital habitats and the planetary defense platforms, the tactical officer yelled, his voice cracking. Helm, advance to intercept vector, Thorne commanded, his voice a blade of calm cutting through the noise. Position us between their lead ship and the habitats. Divert all available power to the forward shields. Ben, open a channel. All frequencies, standard first contact protocols. Let them know they are firing on a sovereign, peaceful world. Channel open, sir, Ben Carter responded, his fingers flying across his console. Sir, they are not responding. Wait, I'm picking up their internal fleet comms. The sovereign of the flagship is referring to our maneuver as a final, pointless gesture of sentimental defiance. Let them think it's pointless, Thorne said, his hands gripping the arms of his command chair until his knuckles were white. Tactical, fire a full volley. Torpedoes and railguns. Give them the primitive display they're expecting. The Indomitus bucked as its weapon systems unleashed hell. A salvo of brilliant Azure fusion warheads streaked across the void, followed by the invisible, faster-than-light flicker of kinetic slugs. It was a show of force that would have obliterated a lesser fleet. The Vorlag flagship, the truth unveiled, did not deign to move. Fields of shimmering, hexagonal gold energy materialized around it. The fusion torpedoes impacted and were not detonated, but unmade, their energy signatures smoothed out into nothingness. The railgun slugs were annihilated millions of kilometers from their target by pinpoint lances of disruptive energy. The Vorlag ship remained as serene and unblemished as a mountain peak. Ben Carter's face was ashen. Commodore, new communication from the Sovereign. It's a fleet-wide broadcast. He says, the ephemera exhaust their meager energies. A touching, if futile, display. Proceed with the cleansing. The glow from the 5 Vorlag dreadnoughts intensified, their planet-killing weapons reaching their final charging state. They've taken the bait, Thorne growled. Their power grids are maxed out, focused entirely on their offensive systems and their energy shields. They're blind to anything that isn't a form of energy they recognize. He locked his gaze on the tactical display, which showed Anya's station icon, flashing from amber to green. It is time. He opened the channel. Anya, the stage is yours. Give them the cacophony. In her sterile white chamber, Anya Sharma closed her eyes as the neurointegration cradle enveloped her head. The world dissolved into the cool, silent, infinite space of the Ethelred Archives interface. Archive is online, she reported, her voice coming over the comm as a detached whisper, harmonizing the broadcast. Using the fall of Warsaw, 1939, as the primary carrier wave, the grief index is high. She did not flip a switch. She reached into the archive, into the raw, digitized history of her species. She opened a file, a memory, a scream, and then she opened them all. Aboard the Truth Unveiled, Sovereign Vexia observed the primitive human ship's final act of defiance with a sense of detached amusement. His form, a flawless, towering construct of interlocking black crystal, pulsed with the gentle blue-white light of pure reason. The ephemera were so beautifully predictable, Their actions were governed by crude emotion, their tactics by desperation. The cleansing of their colony was a simple logical imperative. And then the universe fractured. It was not an energy wave. His sensors remained silent. It was not a physical force. His ship's inertial dampeners registered nothing. It was a contamination, a subtle, pervasive dissonance that slid through his ship's reality-warping shields as if they were mist. It resonated not in the ship's hull, but in the crystalline lattice of his own consciousness. A low hum started, not in the air, but in his mind. It was ugly, organic, and illogical. On his tactical display, a ghost signal bloomed from the human ship. It had no classification, no energy, no mass, no frequency. It was a broadcast of something else, something for which the Vorlog had no word. The hum sharpened, and a voice whispered within it, a thought that was not his. Where am I? It's so dark. Vexia's internal light flickered from serene blue to a confused violet. An anomaly? A weaponized data stream? He initiated a self-diagnostic, a process as innate to him as thought itself. The result was impossible, foreign qualia intrusion. Around him, his command staff were beginning to falter. Their own internal lights shifted and stuttered. The fire, my skin. Oh gods, make it stop. This thought was accompanied by the phantom sensation of heat, of melting, an irrational psychosomatic response. Why was he feeling the memory of pain from a being who had died centuries ago on a forgotten ball of mud? The hum became a roar, and the whispers became a tidal wave. An entire species worth of suffering slammed into his mind. I love you. He betrayed me. The baby's not breathing. It's a beautiful day. I'm so alone. Vexia felt a sensation for which he had no framework. It was a paradox of joy and agony, of love and hate, of hope and despair, all crashing together in the same moment. His logical mind, built on the elegant certainty of mathematics, was being savaged by the chaotic, contradictory mess of human feeling. A hairline fracture spiderwebbed across his chest crystal with a sharp, singing sound. The Ethelred archive was not a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of infection. The Vorlog, with their subtly telepathic, group-minded consciousness, were exquisitely vulnerable. They were being force-fed the entirety of the human experience. Every war, every murder, every act of kindness, every broken heart, every moment of pure, unadulterated terror. On the bridge of the truth unveiled, a navigator whose function was to perceive the perfect mathematical beauty of space-time suddenly began to project images from its own mind onto the bulkheads. The twisted wreckage of a ground car accident, a child weeping over a dead pet, the mushroom cloud of a nuclear explosion. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, it imploded, its mind annihilated by the sheer volume of alien grief. Another crew member began screaming, a high, piercing keen of pure sonic energy, as it was forced to simultaneously experience the agonies of childbirth, the slow decay of cancer, and the sharp, sudden terror of a predator's attack. Vexia collapsed, his towering form no longer able to support its own weight. He was drowning in an ocean of memory that was not his. He was a soldier dying in a trench, a mother losing a child to plague, a philosopher contemplating suicide, a lover betrayed. He was experiencing a billion lives and a billion deaths, all at once. The weapon wasn't killing him. It was forcing him to live as a human had lived. It was a fate infinitely worse than simple annihilation. And beneath it all, the raw, unfiltered sounds of human life and death. The weeping, the laughing, the shouting, and most of all, the screaming. Not screams of defiance, but of pain, of loss, of sheer mortal terror. One of the Vorlog dreadnoughts, its command crew driven completely insane, fired its primary weapon. The beam of cosmic annihilation meant for Terra Nova sighed through its sister ship, which vanished in a silent, brilliant flash. Another cruiser turned its own weapons upon itself, preferring suicide to the endless, screaming chorus in its mind. Vexia dragged his fracturing body across the deck. He had to warn the hegemony. He had to make them understand. The ephemera were not primitives. They were a sentient plague. Their weakness was a lie. Their fragility was a mask. Their weapons were not made of metal and fire. They were made of ghosts. On the bridge of the Indomitus, the crew watched in stunned, horrified silence. The invincible Vorlag Armada was committing suicide. 2 dreadnoughts were gone. A third was venting its atmosphere, its internal light dead. The last 2 and their entire escort were fleeing in a blind, panicked rout, warping away at random vectors as if trying to escape their own shadows. The engagement had lasted 7 minutes. Ben Carter stared at his console, his face utterly devoid of color. "Commodore," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They're fleet-wide channels. It's not language anymore. It's just raw data streams of pure terror. They keep repeating one concept. The translator is struggling. The closest linguistic equivalent is soul theft or memory plague. They're calling us an echo that kills." Thorne's jaw was a knot of stone. He was staring at the small monitor displaying Anya's biometric readings. They were a frantic, terrifying scribble of red lines. "Anya, disengage the archive, now! That is a direct order," he roared into the comm. There was no reply. "Damn it all to hell!" Thorne was out of his command chair in an instant. "Medical emergency response team to the psionic chamber, now, go!" He sprinted from the bridge, leaving behind a command crew locked in a shared state of shock. They had won. They had saved 20 million people. But the victory felt like a stain on their souls. He found Anya slumped in the neurointegration chair. She was unconscious. A thin trickle of blood running from her nose and ears. The medics were already working on her, their faces grim as they read their scanners. "She's in psychic cascade, sir," the chief medical officer reported, his voice tight. "Her neural pathways are overloaded. She channeled, God, sir, I don't know what she channeled, but her brain activity is off the scale. We have to stabilize her now, or we'll lose her." Days later, Elias Thorne sat by Anya's bedside in the medbay's quietest room. She was awake, but she was not the same. Her eyes, when they looked at him, seemed to see through him, to see things in the room that were not there. The healers called it psychotemporal dissociation. She was unstuck in time, haunted by the echoes of the billion lives she had touched. "I felt them die, Elias," she whispered, her voice raspy. She had stopped calling him Commodore. "Not the Vorlag, the humans, all of them. I felt every death I broadcasted. I died with them, 1,000,000 times." He took her hand. It was cold. "You saved 20 million, Anya." "Did I?" she asked, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. "Or did I just show the universe that we are more monstrous than any of them could have ever imagined?" A final, decrypted message from the shattered Vorlag fleet had been forwarded to his datapad. It had been broadcast on all known frequencies, a permanent addendum to the galactic archives. It was not a declaration of war. It was a quarantine notice, a warning concerning the species designated human, also known as the ephemera. Do not enter their space. Do not answer their hails. Do not engage their vessels. Their physical technology is a deliberate deception. Their true weapon is their own flawed nature. They have weaponized their history. They have weaponized sorrow. To fight them is not to risk destruction, but to risk the assimilation of your consciousness into a chorus of unending despair. They are not a civilization. They are a sentient, infectious grief. Thorne closed the datapad. He looked at the brilliant, broken young woman in the bed before him, the living embodiment of humanity's terrible triumph. They were no longer the plucky underdogs of the galaxy. They were the ghosts at the feast, the monsters in the dark that other monsters were now afraid of. They were safe, but they were, and would forever be, alone.